The world had changed beyond recognition. Where once sprawling cities dominated the landscape, now only scattered ruins remained, half buried beneath centuries of dust and vegetation. The mighty civilization that had built monuments reaching to the heavens had fallen, leaving behind only fragments and echoes of its former glory. In this desolate future, a specialized research organization called the Evolutionary Heritage Institute operated from one of the few remaining scientific facilities. Their mission, to understand and possibly restore humanity from the brink of extinction. The small collective of interdisciplinary scientists represented perhaps the last organized pursuit of knowledge on the planet. Dr. Elias Morgan stood at the edge of an excavation site, his worn face weathered by years of disappointment and false leads. At 53, he was considered one of the foremost genetic researchers left in the world, though that distinction meant little when the entire scientific community numbered fewer than 100 individuals. The wind whipped his salt and pepper hair as he surveyed the ancient ruins before him. "This has to be it," he muttered, clutching his tablet with white knuckles. "The biological signatures are stronger here than anywhere we've found in the past decade." Behind him, Dr. Lara Novak approached, her footsteps crunching on the dusty ground. "The preliminary scans are promising," she said, brushing a strand of dark hair from her face. "But I've learned not to get my hopes up." Lara was a brilliant archaeogeneticist who had worked alongside Elias for nearly 15 years. Their relationship had evolved from professional respect to a deep friendship forged through countless disappointments and rare victories, where Elias was driven by unwavering determination. Lara tempered her expectations with caution born from experience. "This time is different," Elias insisted, his eyes gleaming with the fervor that had sustained him through decades of research. "The biomarkers match what we've theorized should be present in preserved human DNA." A few meters away, Mason Reeves secured the perimeter of their camp, his military training evident in his methodical movements. The former soldier had joined their expedition 3 years ago after the collapse of the last organized military outpost. His combat experience had saved their lives more than once during their expeditions into unstable territories. "Dr. Morgan," Mason called, his voice gruff from years of giving orders. "The security systems are operational. We should be safe from scavengers, at least for the night." Elias nodded his acknowledgement. The world might be dying, but danger still lurked in its shadows. Bands of desperate survivors roamed the wastelands, and not all were friendly. There were also the environmental hazards, unpredictable weather patterns, toxic zones, and occasionally, predators that had adapted all too well to the changed world. The research team had established their base in what appeared to be the remains of an underground research facility. Most of its structure was remarkably intact, protected from the elements by layers of earth and advanced materials that had withstood the test of time. As night fell, the team gathered in what they had converted into a command center. Holographic displays illuminated the room with a blue glow, showing maps, data stream, and analysis of the day's findings. "Tomorrow we begin the excavation in earnest," Elias announced to the assembled team of 12 researchers and support staff. "If our preliminary readings are correct, this site contains the most well-preserved human genetic material we've discovered yet." A murmur of excitement rippled through the group. They had all dedicated their lives to this cause, understanding what had happened to humanity and finding a way to ensure its survival. "Let's not get ahead of ourselves," Lara cautioned, always the voice of reason. "We still don't know if the samples will be viable for analysis, let alone replication." Elias smiled at her familiar caution. "Of course. But allow us this moment of hope, Lara. It's been too long since we've had reason for it." The night passed with the typical sounds of a research camp, the hum of equipment, occasional laughter, and the persistent wind outside their shelter. For Elias, sleep came fitfully as it always did before a major excavation. His dreams were filled with fragmented images of the past, a world he had never known except through damaged archives and fragmentary records. Morning arrived with a pale sun struggling to pierce the perpetually hazy sky. The team moved with practiced efficiency, setting up excavation equipment and preparing their mobile laboratory for immediate analysis of any findings. "Beginning subsurface scan," announced Kira Yoshida, their technology specialist. Her fingers danced across holographic controls as a drone the size of a dinner plate descended into an opening they had cleared the previous day. The team watched the drones feed on a shared display. The underground chamber appeared mostly intact, with what looked like preservation units lining the walls. The sight sent a surge of excitement through the group. These were exactly the kind of containment systems that might have protected biological samples from degradation. "Atmospheric readings show minimal contamination," Kira reported. "Structural integrity at 82%. It should be safe to enter." Elias could barely contain his anticipation as he and Lara prepared to enter the chamber. They donned protective suits, not just for their safety, but to prevent contamination of whatever samples might remain viable after all these centuries. "Remember the protocols," Lara reminded everyone. "This could be the most significant discovery of our lifetimes." The descent into the chamber was slow and methodical. Every step was documented, every observation recorded for later analysis. When they finally reached the main laboratory level, Elias felt a shiver run down his spine that had nothing to do with the temperature. "This is incredible," he breathed, his voice slightly distorted through his helmet's communication system. "Look at the preservation state of everything." The underground facility was unlike anything they had encountered before. Most ruins were chaotic, the result of violence, natural disasters, or simply the relentless decay of time. This place, however, gave the impression of having been deliberately sealed and preserved. "It's as if they knew they were creating a time capsule," Lara observed, running a scanner over what appeared to be a storage unit. The team worked methodically, cataloging and sampling with painstaking care. Hours passed in a blur of scientific precision until Elias found himself standing before a sealed container marked with symbols that matched nothing in their linguistic database. "This is odd," he said, calling Lara over. "These markings don't correspond to any known human language from our archives." Lara studied the symbols with a frown. "Could be a specialized scientific notation, or perhaps a security classification we haven't encountered before." "Only one way to find out," Elias replied, carefully initiating their containment breach protocols. The container opened with a soft hiss, revealing a series of perfectly preserved sample tubes. Each contained what appeared to be genetic material, suspended in a clear solution that still looked fresh despite the passage of centuries. "Preliminary analysis starting now," Lara said, placing one of the tubes into their portable sequencer. The results came faster than expected, the advanced technology of their era making quick work of what would have been months of analysis in the ancient past. As the data streamed across their displays, Elias felt his excitement slowly transform into confusion. "This can't be right," he muttered, running the analysis again. "The sequence doesn't match any known human genome in our database." Lara leaned in, her expression mirroring his confusion. "It has similarities, certainly, but the divergence is too significant. This isn't human DNA as we understand it." And with that realization, what had begun as a routine, if promising, expedition suddenly became something else entirely. The genetic material they had discovered wasn't the missing link to humanity's past they had hoped for. It was something else, something that would force them to question everything they thought they knew about human evolution and the history of their species. The team worked through the night, analyzing sample after sample with increasing bewilderment. The genetic material contained familiar elements of human DNA, but included structures and sequences that were utterly foreign to their understanding of terrestrial biology. "We need to face the possibility," Lara finally said as dawn broke, "that what we're looking at is evidence of non-human intervention in human evolution." The statement hung in the air, heavy with implications. Elias stared at the data scrolling across his screen, his mind racing to find alternative explanations. "You're suggesting alien interference?" Mason asked, breaking the silence. The former soldier had been quiet during most of the analysis, but his strategic mind was always working, assessing threats and possibilities. "I'm suggesting we don't jump to conclusions," Lara replied carefully. "But yes, that is one possibility we have to consider." Elias pushed back from the console, rubbing his tired eyes. "If these samples represent an alternative evolutionary path, one that was engineered rather than naturally evolved, it would explain many of the inconsistencies we've observed in the historical record." The team spent the next several days extracting more samples and expanding their search through the facility. Each new discovery only deepened the mystery. They found records, mostly intact, that documented experiments in genetic engineering far beyond what they had believed possible for the ancient civilization. "Look at this," Kira called out one evening, her voice tight with excitement. She had been analyzing data storage devices recovered from a sealed section of the facility. "I've managed to restore some visual records." The team gathered around as holographic images flickered to life, recordings from the facility's original occupants. The images showed scientists working with equipment both familiar and utterly foreign. But what caught everyone's attention were the figures overseeing the work. Tall, slender beings with features that were almost, but not quite, human. "We've been looking at this all wrong," Elias said slowly, his worldview shifting beneath him like unstable ground. "This facility wasn't built by humans trying to preserve their knowledge. It was built by something else, something studying humans." The revelation sent shockwaves through the team. Some, like Mason, immediately advocated for sealing the facility and reporting back to the Institute headquarters. Others, led by Lara, argued for continuing their investigation with even greater caution and thoroughness. "We can't ignore this," Lara insisted during a heated debate. "This could be the answer to why humanity nearly vanished. We have a responsibility to understand what happened." "Or we could be awakening something best left dormant," Mason countered, his hand unconsciously moving to the weapon at his hip. Elias found himself torn between these perspectives. His life's work had been dedicated to preserving and understanding humanity's past. Now he faced the possibility that the very definition of humanity might be something different than he had always believed. "We continue," he finally decided, "but we implement maximum security protocols, and we share nothing with the outside world until we have a clearer understanding of what we're dealing with." The decision would have far-reaching consequences, though none of them could have predicted exactly how their lives would change in the coming weeks. As they delved deeper into the facility and its records, a narrative began to emerge, one that rewrote human history in terrifying ways. The beings they now referred to as the Visitors had apparently been monitoring Earth for millennia, occasionally intervening in human evolution through subtle genetic manipulation. "It seems they were conducting some kind of long-term experiment," Elias explained during one of their nightly briefings. "Testing different evolutionary paths, perhaps comparing results across various parameters. Like scientists breeding different strains of bacteria to see which produces the desired outcome," Lara added, her voice hollow with the implications. "But why?" asked Kira. "What could they possibly gain from manipulating our evolution?" It was Mason who offered the most disturbing hypothesis. "Resources," he said grimly. "Every military strategy ultimately comes down to resources. Perhaps they were developing us as a resource." The thought sent a chill through the room. Were humans nothing more than crops being cultivated for some unimaginable harvest? The records they had discovered didn't provide clear answers, whether by design or due to the inevitable data loss over centuries. Their breakthrough came nearly 2 weeks into the excavation when they discovered a sealed chamber deep within the facility's lowest level. Unlike the other areas they had explored, this section showed signs of deliberate lockdown, emergency protocols activated in response to some crisis. Whatever happened here, they tried to contain it. Mason observed as they prepared to breach the sealed doors. Inside, they found what appeared to be a control center. Curved consoles surrounded a central platform where a device unlike anything they had seen before rested. It resembled a sphere about 1 meter in diameter, its surface inscribed with the same unknown symbols they had found throughout the facility. "It's still powered," Kira reported with astonishment, her instruments detecting a faint energy signature emanating from the sphere. "After all this time, it's still active." Before anyone could respond, the sphere pulsed with a soft blue light. Symbols across its surface illuminated in sequence. And then a beam of light projected upward, forming into a holographic display that filled the chamber. The image showed Earth, recognizable despite changes to its continents, surrounded by smaller images that appeared to be data readouts. A voice spoke in an unknown language, the sounds unlike anything produced by human vocal cords. "It's responding to our presence," Lara whispered, her scientific curiosity momentarily overriding her caution. As if confirming her assessment, the holographic display shifted, cycling through various images of human evolution, from early hominids to modern humans and beyond, to forms they had never seen before. The images were accompanied by more of the alien speech, which gradually began to shift, the sounds morphing until, incredibly, they began to form recognizable words. "Adaptation complete," the voice announced in halting English. "Communication established. Protocol initiated." Elias stepped forward, drawn by an impulse he couldn't explain. "Who are you?" he asked, his voice steady despite the pounding of his heart. The hologram shifted again, focusing now on a single figure, one of the tall, slender beings they had seen in the earlier recordings. "I am Aethor, overseer of the Earth Seeding Project. Identification protocol requires query. What is your designation and genetic sequence?" The team exchanged shocked glances. The artificial intelligence, if that's what it was, had apparently been programmed to awaken when approached by specific genetic signatures. "My name is Dr. Elias Morgan," he replied carefully. "I am a human researcher studying the history of my species." The hologram flickered, and the alien figure, Aethor, tilted its head in what seemed like confusion. "Anomaly detected. Your genetic pattern contains markers of both indigenous Earth species and overseers. Explanation required." The words hit Elias like a physical blow. What did it mean that he contained genetic markers of these overseers? Before he could formulate a response, Lara stepped forward. "We are descendants of the people who lived on this planet thousands of years ago," she explained. "We have no knowledge of any overseers or seeding project." Aethor's hologram remained still for several seconds, as if processing this information. "Temporal analysis indicates 3,047 standard cycles have passed since last system access. Protocol dictates information disclosure under these circumstances." The hologram expanded again, now showing a detailed star map. The seeding project was initiated by the Consortium of Evolved Worlds to study divergent evolutionary paths across compatible biospheres. Earth was designated Experiment Zone 3428A. What followed was a flood of information that left the team reeling. According to Aethor, Earth had been one of thousands of planets where the Consortium had introduced genetic material and monitored its development. Periodically, they would introduce subtle changes to guide evolution along desired paths, comparing results across different worlds. "Humanity, as you understand it," Aethor explained, "was one of several parallel experiments on this planet alone. Your branch was designated the Autonomous Development Control Group, allowed to evolve with minimal interference after initial seeding." "And the other groups?" Elias asked, dreading the answer. "Varied parameter adjustments. Some focused on physical adaptation, others on cognitive development, social structure formation, or technological advancement rates." The hologram displayed images of humanoid beings that looked similar to humans but with subtle differences. Some taller and more slender, others more robust, some with cranial structures suggesting larger brain capacity. "Where are these other groups now?" Mason demanded, his tactical mind immediately assessing potential threats. Most experimental lines were terminated when they reached predetermined developmental milestones or failed to meet expected parameters. Ethor stated with clinical detachment, "Standard protocol for experimental hygiene." The casual mention of genocide, of entire branches of humanity being terminated as failed experiments, struck them all into horrified silence. "And us?" Lara finally asked. "The Autonomous Development Group? Were we scheduled for termination too?" The hologram flickered again. Anomaly in historical records. The Autonomous Development Group exceeded parameter expectations in unexpected ways. Before scheduled assessment, a faction within the consortium violated protocols. They integrated their own genetic material with the experimental subjects, creating hybrid lineages. "Are you saying some of the overseers bred with humans?" Kira asked incredulously. Affirmative. This violation led to internal conflict within the consortium. Records indicate a containment protocol was enacted. This facility was sealed. Further data is corrupted or classified beyond my authorization level. Elias felt the room spinning around him. The implications were staggering. If what Ethor was saying was true, then humanity, or at least some portion of it, carried the genes of these alien overseers. And he, according to the AI's initial assessment, showed stronger markers of this heritage than others. "What happened to the consortium after the containment protocol?" he asked. "Unknown. Communication with the central authority was severed as part of the containment procedure. This system was placed in dormant monitoring mode until contact could be re-established or until authorized genetic signatures were detected." Ethor's hologram turned its expressionless face toward Elias. "Your presence has triggered the secondary protocol. Reactivation sequence has been initiated." "Reactivation of what?" Mason demanded, his hand now openly resting on his weapon. "The beacon. This facility will now transmit a signal to alert the consortium that viable experimental subjects have been identified." The implications hit them all at once. This facility was about to broadcast their existence to the stars, to beings who had once seen humans as nothing more than laboratory specimens. "Can you stop the transmission?" Elias asked urgently. "Negative. The beacon protocol is hardwired and cannot be countermanded by verbal instruction. Only direct interface by an authorized overseer can modify core protocols." The team erupted into urgent discussion. Mason immediately advocated destroying the facility entirely, while Kira suggested trying to hack the system. Lara argued for attempting to understand more about the technology before taking drastic action. Throughout the debate, Elias remained silent, staring at the hologram of Ethor. Something about the AI's words echoed in his mind. "Only direct interface by an authorized overseer." "How would an overseer interface with the system?" he finally asked, interrupting the heated discussion. Ethor's hologram gestured to a recess in the central platform. "Genetic and neural pattern authentication via the command nexus." Elias approached the platform, examining the indicated area. It appeared to be designed for a humanoid hand, though slightly larger than human norm. "Dr. Morgan, what are you thinking?" Lara asked, concern evident in her voice. "If I have overseer genetic markers as Ethor claims," Elias said slowly, "there's a possibility I could interface with the system." "That's inane," Mason objected. "Even if you have some alien DNA, that doesn't mean you can operate their technology. And who knows what that thing might do to your mind?" "Do you have a better suggestion?" Elias countered. "In approximately," he glanced at Ethor, who responded immediately, 47 minutes until beacon activation reaches irreversible status. "We don't have time to debate this," Elias continued. "If there's even a chance I can stop the signal, I have to try." The look on Lara's face made it clear she wanted to object, but her scientific mind couldn't deny the logic of his argument. At least let us monitor your vital signs, she insisted, attaching a small device to his neck. Elias nodded, then turned back to the platform. What should I expect when I interface? He asked Aethor. The command nexus will scan your neural patterns and genetic structure. If sufficient authorization markers are present, you will experience direct neural linking with the facility's systems. You will perceive the system architecture as conceptual constructs based on your own cognitive framework. And if I don't have sufficient markers, neural feedback will terminate the connection. In specimens with inadequate physiological resilience, this may result in permanent neural damage or termination of biological functions. So it might kill me, Elias translated grimly. That is an accurate assessment. Elias took a deep breath and looked around at his team, people who had become his family in this broken world. If this goes wrong, he said quietly, get as far from this facility as possible before the beacon activates. Take what we've learned back to the Institute. Humanity deserves to know the truth, whatever happens next. Before anyone could object further, he placed his hand on the interface panel. For a moment, nothing happened, and Elias felt a mix of disappointment and relief. Then pain like he had never experienced lanced through his skull, and the world dissolved around him. Elias found himself floating in a conceptual space that his mind interpreted as a vast network of light and information. He had no body here, only awareness that stretched across what felt like the entire facility. He could sense the beacon, a pulsing red node in the network, gradually building power as it prepared to broadcast. But he could also sense something else. Hidden partitions in the system, sealed areas of data that even Aethor didn't seem to have access to. Drawn by intuition, Elias directed his consciousness toward these hidden sectors. As he penetrated the first layer of security, information flooded into him, not as data or language, but as direct understanding. He saw the truth of the consortium, a collective of advanced species that had evolved beyond physical form in many ways. He saw their motivations for the seeding project, not malice or callous experimentation for its own sake, but a desperate search for evolutionary paths they had not taken, biological innovations they had lost in their pursuit of technological advancement. Earth had been special among their experimental worlds, a planet with exceptional biodiversity and environmental conditions conducive to rapid adaptation. The humans of Elias's lineage had indeed been the control group, but they had surprised their watchers by developing in unexpected ways, showing creativity and resilience that fascinated the overseers. One faction of the consortium, led by an overseer named Aethor, the original being the AI was modeled after, had become so intrigued by humanity that they violated their own most sacred protocols. They integrated their genetic material with human test subjects, creating hybrids they hoped would combine the best qualities of both species. This act had divided the consortium, leading to conflict that eventually resulted in the abandonment of Earth as an active experiment. The containment protocol had been enacted not to prevent humans from escaping, but to prevent other factions from destroying what Aethor's group saw as a new and promising form of life. Before sealing the facility, they had left behind this system, a way for their hybrid descendants to one day understand their heritage and make contact, should they choose to. The beacon was not meant to summon destroyers, but to alert Aethor's faction that their experiment had succeeded, that hybrid humans had survived and evolved intelligence sufficient to rediscover the truth. With this understanding came choice. Elias could see how to disable the beacon permanently, keeping humanity hidden from the stars. He could also see how to modify it, controlling what information was sent and to whom, or he could let it activate as designed, announcing their existence to beings whose motives he now partially understood but could never fully predict. In the physical world, barely seconds had passed. Elias's body stood rigid, hands still pressed to the interface, while his teammates watched in anxious silence. Within the system, however, Elias faced a decision that would determine the future of what remained of humanity. After what seemed like an eternity of contemplation, he made his choice. Rather than simply disabling the beacon, he rewrote its message. Instead of the automated signal Ether had prepared, he crafted something new, a message of introduction from one sentient species to another, neither begging for help nor hiding in fear. He included enough of their scientific knowledge to demonstrate their advancement and enough of their history to show their resilience. As he worked, Elias became aware of another presence in the system, a fragment of the original Ethor's consciousness. Preserved all these millennia, it observed his actions without interfering, and Elias sensed something like approval as he completed his modifications. "You have chosen a path neither I nor my creators anticipated." The fragment communicated directly to his mind. Perhaps that is fitting. True evolution always transcends its origins. With the message complete and the beacon reprogrammed, Elias withdrew from the system. Consciousness returned to his physical form with a jolt that sent him staggering backward. Lara caught him before he could fall, her face tight with concern. "Elias, are you all right? What happened?" It took him several moments to reorient himself to physical reality and find his voice. "I understand now," he managed finally. "I understand everything." Over the next several hours, he explained what he had learned about their true history and the choice he had made. The team's reactions ranged from disbelief to awe to lingering suspicion. "So you're telling me we're all part alien?" Mason asked, struggling with the concept. "To varying degrees," Elias confirmed. The hybrid program affected only a small population initially, but those genes spread throughout the human population over thousands of generations. In most people, the markers are minimal, just enough to create the unique cognitive abilities that separate humans from other Earth species. In others, like me apparently, the markers are stronger. "And you reprogrammed the beacon to send a friendly hello instead of the original signal?" Kira asked. "How do we know they'll respond peacefully?" "We don't," Elias admitted. But neither did Ethor's faction when they chose to create hybrids instead of following their protocols. Sometimes evolution requires a leap into the unknown. In the days that followed, the team continued to explore the facility, now with Ethor's AI as a willing guide rather than a potential threat. They discovered technologies beyond their understanding and historical records that filled in many of the gaps in human history. The knowledge they gained would revolutionize their understanding of humanity's past and potential future. The question that loomed largest in all their minds was what would happen when, if, their message received a response. Would the descendants of Ethor's faction still exist after all this time? Would they be benevolent toward their long-lost experimental offspring? Or would other factions of the consortium intercept the message and see it as reason to revisit an abandoned experiment, perhaps to terminate it permanently? There were no certain answers, only possibilities. In sending the message, Elias had committed what remained of humanity to a path from which there was no turning back, for better or worse. They would face whatever came from the stars not as ignorant test subjects, but as beings aware of their own complex heritage. 1 month after the activation of the modified beacon, the team prepared to return to the Institute with their findings. The facility had been secured, its technologies and records documented as thoroughly as possible with their current understanding. Ethor's AI had been copied to a portable system that would allow continued access to its knowledge. As they packed the last of their equipment, Lara found Elias standing alone at the entrance to the facility, gazing up at the sky. "Second thoughts?" she asked, coming to stand beside him. He shook his head slowly. "Not about sending the message. That was the right choice. But I'm wondering what it means for us, for me, knowing what we are. Are we still human? Were we ever?" Lara considered this for a moment before responding. "I think human has always been a concept in evolution, not a fixed state. Our ancestors became human gradually, through countless small changes. Learning that some of those changes came from outside doesn't erase everything else that makes us who we are. Our struggles, our achievements, our capacity for both destruction and creation. And if they come, the overseers, or whatever remains of them, what then? Then we meet them as equals, Lara said firmly, not as experiments or subjects, but as a species that has survived and evolved in ways they never predicted. That was the point of your message, wasn't it? Elias nodded, finding comfort in her perspective. Whatever came next, whether contact with their cosmic progenitors or continued isolation in the stars, humanity would face it with a new understanding of their place in the universe. They were neither the random product of blind evolution nor the purpose-built creation of higher beings, but something unique, a species that had forged its own path through the cosmos, carrying the legacy of two evolutionary histories in their very cells. As the sun set on the ancient facility for what might be the last time, Elias felt a strange sense of peace. The search for human DNA had led them to discover that evolution had indeed taken a different path than they had believed. But that path had led to them, standing at the threshold of a new chapter in human history. Whatever came next would be their story to write. In the deepest chamber of the facility, now sealed and silent, the beacon continued its broadcast to the stars, and somewhere in the vast darkness of space, something was listening,